Hi everyone, it's Lee again. Today I wanted to kind of go over some thoughts that had been going on in my mind today regarding my past relationships. And in the past 15 years or so, I've gone through about three different relationships, one of which I didn't quite get off the ground, but that person still remains a part of my life. Now, like I said, I had dated about three different people in the past 15 years, and each of those relationships, I was able to learn something from it. And I think from my first big relationship, as it was my first, like, really serious relationship. This occurred in between myself and a Japanese man while I was living in Japan. And so we started dating around 2012, and then we ended our relationship in around 2014, I think, about the beginning of that year. Um, and I didn't do it the correct way. There was a fair amount of me leading him on without really meaning to. It wasn't my intention to play with his feelings or to lead him on in any way, but I ended up doing so because I was scared. Um, I was scared of making him feel hurt, directly, either through honesty. And, you know, sometimes it's the things that you put off saying or don't say at all that are even more cruel than just saying what's the truth, you know. That's something that has been hard for me to realize over the years because I've made that mistake a few times in the past. Um, my second relationship was longer, about 2000, the end of 2014 into 2015. I started talking to a man who lived in Indonesia. He and I are still best friends, but due to distance, our relationship never really got off to the way that we wanted it to, you know. Um, and it was my longest standing relationship, and probably the one that taught me the most. Uh, because he started, challenging my ideas about life and challenging my motivations and challenging, in some ways it felt like he was challenging me as a person, but I know he just, wanted what's best for me and wanted me to understand. Sometimes whenever I say certain things a certain way, it can sound hurtful, or, I've hurt him many times, unfortunately. It's the people that you love the most that you sometimes end up hurting the most. And like I said, sometimes the things that you don't say are more cruel than the things that you do end up saying. So he and I had continued a long distance relationship while I was still living in Japan and he was in Indonesia. And we had met one time in Indonesia, for about 2, maybe 3 weeks, I think, is how long I stayed over there to visit him. And we stayed in a hotel together, got to know each other physically, and I think someone that you have so much history with is even now still hard to put away because, even though we had ended our relationship, there are aspects of our relationship, um, that, as long as I wasn't involved with anybody else at the time, we would sometimes trade intimate messages with one another. That's sometimes what you got to do when you're in a long distance relationship. And You know, it's been tough because it's been fairly recent that he has decided to get back into the dating world, and I'm fine with that. Um that's something I want him to have. I want him to be happy. Even if it's not with me, and even if I really want it, I can't control that. Sometimes we just have to let things go. I do want to see him again, and um, we've discussed if he's in the right place for it, and I'm in the right place for it, that maybe we could try things again at some point. You know, if I can ensure that I can be closer physically, you know, geographically, I mean, because that's ultimately kind of what ended our relationship, is that we couldn't maintain a baseline of closeness, because after I came back to the United States from Japan, our time zones were drastically different, and we just couldn't keep it up. So it was hard. We couldn't give each other the amount of emotional devotion that one deserves when they're in a relationship. It's hard to do that at a distance with somebody. But I guess I've just craved that kind of relationship for so long that it's hard to overlook the things that don't make you a match with someone. And it makes it easy for me to overlook those minor details, you know. I'm I used to take that sorry. I used to take it a little bit personally, when I would break up with somebody, and they would inevitably get with somebody else. There's always that, I don't know, it's part of human nature, I guess, but there's always that twinge of jealousy, maybe, and uh, because I'm a very anxious person and just want to be loved like anyone else, and it's hard when you can't find that in the person that you really want. But what ends up happening is that sometimes with that person, you end up building fantasies, unreal fantasies. And I'm not talking the sexual kind of fantasies. I'm talking about fantasies of what your life could be like with that person. And I'm guilty of this so much. With the last three people I've been with, I have, at one time or another, idealized a married life with that person, despite there not really being any sort of clue that that would happen. And this is part of my codependency issues that I need to get past, because it's torturing me inside to love so intensely and not be able to get it back from the person you want. And it happened again in my most recent relationship, the one that I mentioned before that didn't quite get off the ground. And part of that was because I wasn't clear in what I wanted, and I kind of jumped to conclusions and confused him, confused myself. And, he lives in Chicago, which, again, is closer than, somewhere like Indonesia in the Pacific. But, it's still hard to balance a relationship whenever I'm living in the state of Texas right now and he's in the state of Illinois, trying to see if it's possible for me to even go up there. I do not have an income bracket that would support a life in a place like Chicago. Um, Nowhere near, you know. Apartments in Chicago are probably minimum 1,500 or 1,000 for like a really cheap studio, maybe. But where I live, it's normal to get something maybe for 700 at the very minimum. There's still a few places that are still like, even for a studio, that's $1,000 for one person. But it's much more space here where I live, and it is within my income level to be able to support myself here. And so we both had very different ideals. And I fell deeply in love with him too, to some degree, Despite the kind of shortness at which things worked between us, we had established a relationship more as friends with benefits, that kind of thing, and we discussed maybe moving on in the relationship, but I don't know, I felt like at times that both of us had difficulty communicating. Um, the way I express myself physically to someone might be strong for some people. He's not the type of person that enjoys a lot of physical touch. I think maybe he feels smothered when somebody's touching him all the time. But that's something I need intensely from someone, so it's hard to negotiate with someone that has such a strong barrier. And I don't want to force it on somebody either. Eventually he kind of, acquiesced to some of what I asked from him, but I don't know if we're a match in that way necessarily. I don't know if that's something that he, had we continued with our relationship, if that's something that we would have gotten an argument about, or something that would have become a problem eventually, or if it's something that we could have compromised on. I don't know. But physical touch is something that I need to have. I can't do without it. It's what makes me feel loved, and not only that, just to be in the presence, vulnerable with somebody, and not always clothed in front of each other. Just because the sex is done doesn't mean we have to get our clothes back on. We can hold each other and be there for one another and feel each other's warmth. That's what I want so badly from someone. To hold me tight and never let go. All right. That's enough for today. But thank you for listening. So, please find love and light in your life and be well.